you miss me? I've been out of it comatose, but the depression is.
Hello and welcome to Controlled Burns, the weekly hobby list post podcast hosted by me, SlowBurne from Wildfire Gaming. Let's see. Today I want to take a look back, as we get to the end of the year, at my year in review in gaming. Originally I planned on including the other mediums in this episode, in addition to the video games, including music, movies, and books. But the truth is, I have listened to so much music in 2024 that and music that was actually released in 2024 as well, that I'm going to blow that out in a big way in the coming weeks. And that's going to include my favorite albums and songs of the year that actually came out in 2024. And then this episode also took me longer to put together than I expected. I actually had more going on in terms of gaming than I really thought I did. So I'll plan on wrapping my discussion on the few books and movies that I checked out this year into that episode. So look forward to that, but for now, we'll focus exclusively on the games I played in 2024. Before we go any further, Controlled Burns is a weekly hobby list podcast with a particular focus on lists and topics related to video games, music, TV, and film, as well as other hobbies and aspects of pop culture. If you're interested in writing into the podcast and having your comments or questions read on air, you can write into the podcast at controlledburnes@gmail.com. To start, I'm going to dive into discussing all the games that I started and finished in 2024. We're going to include a look at my stats from the PlayStation and Xbox wrap ups, and then we'll culminate with a ranking of the games that I finished this year. After that, we'll spend a bit less time. Well, actually, no, I think that's pretty much going to be it for this episode because, like I said, I considered bringing in the books and movies that I watched, but I think we're just going to save that for the next one. So let's start by taking a look at the games that I started in 2024, and then we'll take it from there. 2024. I was actually out of pocket at the beginning of 2024. I got married on December 28th, and so I was on my honeymoon for the first week and change of January. So I would say that from that point onward as whenever I really got started in earnest. But I did get something, you started with something pretty cool at the beginning, and then I finished with. It's kind of interesting to quantify the number of games that I finished this year. I would say that there's 45 games that I finished that are like finishable, but then there's other games that I played, like the Jackbox games, for instance, that we really got into this year in my family that aren't really finishable, right? But that I spent a lot of time with, and so I'm gonna get into those a little bit later. But in terms of games that you can really finish, it was the 45 game mark. Um, to get a feel for what the early part of my year in gaming was like, we really kind of have to go back to February 2023. That was when I locked in for the first, and it's actually the only time that I've ever done this. I'm not on it now. That was the first. That was the time that I had locked in a year of Nintendo's $50 online tier, which included Nintendo 64 and Game Boy Advance titles. So at the tail end of 2023, and then at the early part of 2024, I was focusing a lot on those titles as I tried to really maximize the value of that subscription. To be honest, most of the games I played in 2023 that were on that subscription, but on January 12th is when I started my first game this year, which was Fire Emblem for the Game Boy Advance. Prior to this, I'd only ever played Fire Emblem Fate's Birthright, but I really loved that game and was eager to try a different game in the series. While I anticipated the first game being a step down due to its age, I actually found the opposite to be true. I found the story and characters to be significantly more compelling in the older title, and the strategy even deeper and more difficult. It took me just over a month to finish the game, and I wrapped it on February 21st, which was just as my subscription was coming to an end. The other major Nintendo Online game I started at the beginning of this year was Mario Party 3. I started that one on January 17th and finished it on February 16th. You actually can finish Mario Party 3 because it does have a story mode, which was interesting and actually a surprisingly tense experience. It was actually the Mario parties that made me want to get on the Nintendo Online in the first place so I could play with Reagan. So we definitely played a lot of those throughout 2023 and then early in 2024. Later in January, I started up a couple of old PlayStation 1 games that I played as a kid. That included Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace and Buzz Lightyear Star Command. Started Star Wars January 22nd, Buzz Lightyear January 24th. Both of those on the PS5 because they're part of the classics program that PlayStation has going on right now, where they're bringing older PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 titles to modern consoles. I didn't finish either of them and actually never have. I've never finished either of those games. But I did enjoy dipping into them and experiencing the nostalgia in January, which I actually often tend to do. I remember booting up my PS1. It was either in 2022 or 2023 and playing some old games to bring in that year. And then I remember an earlier year, my brother and I really got into old NES and SNES games in January. So we'll see if that trend continues again in 2025. Also on January 22nd, Reagan and I started Halo Reach. I was seeing a bunch of Master Chief stuff on Twitter at the time. I think that was around the time that terrible TV show was airing its second season. But all that Master Chief stuff really made me want to blast through that series again. And that is another series that I often play through in the early part of the year. I just find them to be incredibly replayable. So we played through Reach in 2 days, which kicked off a marathon of the other Halo games that you can play through in co-op split screen. That included Halo 1 between January 24th and 26th, Halo 2 between January 27th and February 2nd, Halo 3 ODST between February 2nd and February 9th, Halo 3 between February 9th and February 11th, and Halo 4 between February 11th and February 23rd. Halo is absolutely one of my favorite video game series ever, and I definitely want to do at least one podcast discussing it. But lately, both my brother Brandon and my cousin Brett have been wanting to play through those games, so I may hold off until I can go through them again and bring one or both of them on to discuss. The only other game I started during that time frame was Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled on January 23rd. I think I was mostly just using that to test my new PlayStation Portal, which actually works surprisingly well on those games, despite the timing that is required to play that game well. But I didn't play through the entire thing since the original's a game that I've finished many times. I already have the platinum and Nitro Fueled, and I just felt there were better uses of my time in 2024. On a technicality, I also played an hour at most of Borderlands with Brett and his friend Sam on January 31st, but I didn't get anywhere beyond that. I never really had much interest in that series, and that introductory hour certainly did nothing to change that. But after we kind of got through our Halo marathon, Reagan and I did start up new Pokemon Snap on February 18th. She'd played through the original in 2023 when we were on the Nintendo Online service and really liked it, but we just couldn't stick with new Pokemon Snap for some reason. Even though it does have a similar structure and obviously has much improved graphics, I think it's one we might go back to. But at the end of the day, there's just a lot more interesting and engaging games to play than new Pokemon Snap. On February 24th, we started up Octopath Traveler, which is one of my favorite games ever. I played through it a couple times and started it more than that. And some of Reagan's seen some of those playthroughs and passing. She really likes the art style and wanted to see what was all the fuss was about. Um, Octopath is obviously a massive game, and it did get kind of railroaded by some of the other things I was more interested in playing with her this year. Not to mention she's been very busy with her degree. So we still haven't even gotten anywhere close to finishing it. But it is an easy game to dip in and out of thanks to its episodic structure, so it's easy to go back to. Then at the end of February, that saw me start three other games that I failed to finish. The first was February 27th. I started Final Fantasy Adventure on Switch, which is a straight port of the original black and white Game Boy version of that original game. That game is actually the first of the Mana series rather than a true Final Fantasy game. It was just called Final Fantasy Adventure for marketing purposes. At the time, I was coming off of my marathon of the Zelda series, which I played through in 2023 and even back in 2022. It was a long time to get me through all those games. And I found Final Fantasy Adventure to be really just kind of a improved version of that, and I really, really liked it. But I only had a couple of sessions with it, and it was during that very specific time frame. Because the game was actually my cousin Brett's, and he had come over and was just kind of interested in seeing what I thought about it because he really loves Final Fantasy Adventure. Um, but the times that he's come since then, we've just had other things that we wanted to get to, and it just kind of fell to the wayside. But I definitely do want to go back to it. The music's really great, and I did enjoy what I played. The next day is when I started Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. 10 months later, it is still sitting unfinished, which is something of an indictment on it, given the original Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time. Um, while I also loved 7 Remake, Rebirth has not been as smooth of an experience for me. Part of what has slowed me down is my completionist approach to it, and there is a lot to that game. So I've been chipping away at it throughout the year. Another thing that has slowed me down has been Reagan's interest in it. There's a good chance I would have finished it by now if I was just playing by myself. But the way I've been going through it is doing all the story exploration stuff and some of the side stuff myself, and then bringing her in for the story content. I still like the game, but there is a lot of bloat to it that I think could have been cut or repurposed maybe into stronger character focused content. But Brandon really loves it. Brett has a lot of problems with it, and I'm somewhere in the middle. So once I finally get through it, I would like to have them both on for a roundtable discussion. I think that'd be really interesting to really dissect Seven Rebirth coming from different perspectives. Then to close out the leap year for February, it was on February 29th, which only happens once every 4 years. Reagan and I started up the Subspace Emissary mode of Super Smash Bros. Brawl on the Wii. That playthrough did not last more than about a single hour-long session or so, as Reagan didn't really like it. She found it stressful, and I don't have any interest in playing through it again by myself right now, so that was that. March was very slow in terms of new starts. There was only one major game that I started during the month, which was Fallout New Vegas, which I started on March 9th. Unfortunately, it is another game that we left unbeaten this year, which is common for my playthroughs of New Vegas, I will say, for a couple of reasons. The hard ending, where you can't continue playing the game after you get to credits, it always disincentivizes me from finishing it. And it just, when I start getting to the end, there's like, I'm just like, man, if I finish it now, then it's really over. And you would think that that would be fine. And for most games, it would. But for an open world game like that, I just really don't like having a hard ending there. And then I also just really hate the DLCs in Fallout New Vegas. And my playthroughs typically fall off when I get to them. That was the case this time as well, which is a shame, as this was my first time showing it to Reagan after she had watched me play Fallout 3 or 4 last year. She really liked those. I do want to get back to it. And starting and not finishing games is not a good habit, but it is one I've had trouble breaking this year, to be honest. And out of those, New Vegas is not really at the top of my priority list to get back to. Technically, in March, I did also start the original Star Wars Battlefront as part of the ill-fated Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection, which was really a bummer. I was really excited for those games. I played the hell out of them back in the PS2, like right when they came out. I loved the first Battlefront, and then I was really excited about Battlefront 2 as it was coming out. I just in terms of my most played PS2 games, they might even be like the top two. I mean, I really played them a lot. Um, but I never had the ability to play online, which I was really excited about finally being able to do that. But unfortunately, the modern versions on PS4 and PS5 were just really buggy. They were really just a mess. Which I should have expected, considering it was coming from Aspyr, the developer, and they basically destroy everything that they touch. But yeah, it was a huge bummer, and I just quickly gave up trying to play them. Moving on to April, that was a busier month for me. That saw me and Reagan start Spyro the Dragon early in the month. I actually forgot to write the exact date of when we started that, but I think it was early on in April. I wanted Reagan to play through the Spyro games this year because it is the Japanese Year of the Dragon, and those games were very special to me in my own formative gaming years. So far, she's finished the first two, but she was getting frustrated toward the end of Year of the Dragon, so we decided to take a break. Maybe we can finish those off in the last couple of weeks here, though, if she ever comes home. Our method to playing through those games was for her to play through the reignited versions, and then I would rip through the originals so she could see the differences. Outside of the first one, I think she agreed with my assessment that the reignited versions are heavily flawed and much worse than the originals, which is really frustrating. I think there's a lot of reasons for why they're worse. Probably too many to get into here, but suffice to say, I think some of the animation and artwork and voice work of the new versions is frankly embarrassing compared to the originals, which is all the more humiliating considering how old those titles are. Those are PS1 games. But anyway, I finished Fire of the Dragon in July. On April 2nd, we also started Ghost of Tsushima. I don't know why we did that. I knew Reagan wouldn't really care for it, given its high combat to story ratio. But I think it's because I've been wanting to replay it before the sequel's released, and I also have never played through the DLC, so I was looking forward to doing that. So we've chipped away on it throughout the year, but we're nowhere near finishing it right now. On April 11th, we started Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney, which was a much bigger hit for both of us. I had started it before, but I hadn't gotten anywhere near finishing it, so it was really fun to played through it with somebody else, and that neither of us knew what was coming, and kind of trying to figure out what was coming next. I think it's an incredibly well written game, a top contender for the funniest game I've ever played. Technically, we didn't quite finish it because we haven't gotten through the fifth case, which is a bonus case. But the original Japanese version only had the first four cases. Um, which definitely shows. Like when you play through the game, it does feel like the fifth case is definitely tacked on. So it kind of felt like we finished it. It felt like we reached the end of that narrative. On April 12th, I started Bloodborne, which I think was with my friend Chase, who I got introduced to because I live next door to his grandmother. We're planning on having him on very soon to discuss his top 25 games, maybe as soon as next week. We'll see how timing works out this week. But he'd never played Bloodborne, and I felt confident that he would like it, and I was right. But he didn't come over anywhere near enough to get through the whole thing. But then later, much later in the year, like in October, I started it again with Reagan. As I talked about during my Bloodborne podcast, we don't have to get into all that again. But we had an amazing time, and that playthrough wrapped on November 1st. Up next on the docket, also on April 12th, was the start of my playthrough of Psychonauts with Reagan. Earlier in the year, she and I watched through all of Psych Odyssey, which is an incredible 32, I think it's 32 parts, maybe it's 33 now. They did add another episode toward the end there, that chronicles the development of Psychonauts 2, and it spans 7 years of real time, and then the bonus episode, technically it spans 9 years because it came out a couple of years later. That was my second time watching through that documentary, but even though Reagan didn't know anything about it, she was really hooked on it as well. It really is an amazing project. I implore anyone interested in seeing how games are made, or even just how a group of diverse people work together on one big project, and then the drama and the difficulties that naturally ensue from that, to check it out. It's really great. Um, but obviously, after watching that, we had to play the game. But in order to fully get the greatness of Psychonauts 2, you have to play the first game. It's kind of required reading. Psychonauts 2 is a very direct sequel. So we played through the first one and wrapped that up on July 16th. It's definitely not as good as Psychonauts 2, but it's still a really good game, and certainly a very satisfying game to complete. On April 19th, I started Pokemon Red. The gameplay in here was for Reagan to play through Fire Red while I played through the original side by side. The problem with that is that she slows molasses, and I finished the game on May 1st while she has yet to finish Fire Red. So that's where we are on that. On April 26th, I started The Artful Escape. That was actually the reason I got into that. Was set to leave PS Plus. Like, they give you like a month's notice whenever a game is about to leave. And that was a game that I was kind of interested in, but I definitely didn't want to buy it because I knew it was short, and I wasn't sure how much I'd really like it. So I did play through it on PS Plus. It's nothing that mind blowing, but it was a cool experience. I saw credits and I got a platinum trophy, which is not saying much. It's very easy to get the platinum trophy in that game. It's basically just play it. But yeah, I got all that on May 13th, so about a couple weeks there to get through that. But then also on April 26th, I started Observation, which was also leaving PS Plus. The exact same scenario to the Artful Escape. But I actually wrapped that one up much sooner. I finished that one in just 3 days on April 29th. Unlike with the Artful Escape, I came away really quite impressed with Observation. It's an indie horror game where you play as an AI aboard a realistic space station where something has gone horribly wrong. That game doesn't actually have a platinum, but I did get 100% of the trophies on it. On May 5th, I started and finished Parappa the Rapper. This wasn't my first time playing through it, but it was the first time I got the platinum trophy on it, which was a lot tougher than it sounds given how wonky the timing in that game is. It's charming as hell, but realistically, it's pretty mediocre at its core. That same night, I also played through all of Star Wars Rebel Assault 2: The Hidden Empire, which is a PS1 game that got added to PS Premium recently. I actually do have some nostalgia for that game as I played through it and beat it as a kid. And the reason I did that, it was because it was the only one that I knew of, the only Star Wars game at the time that was rated E, which meant that my mom would actually let me play because she was very strict about me playing games that I was, actually in the correct age range for. Unfortunately, that game is absolutely terrible, but the story and acting in its FMV scenes are so bad that they're actually kind of entertaining. But the gameplay itself is boring as hell. But it only takes about an hour to get through. So if you're a Star Wars fan and you want to, see some ridiculous, cringy Star Wars content, then check it out. On May 7th, I started the PS5 version of The Outer Worlds, which is the Spacer's Choice Edition. I know some people didn't really like the Spacer's Choice Edition compared to the original, which I didn't know that whenever I got it. Quite to be honest, I didn't realize that was an issue. I think I might have been playing through PS Plus as well, actually, but then I did end up buying it on a sale because I wasn't going to be able to finish it in time before my PS Plus subscription lapse. I think it was like in early June. But I had played through the original Outer Worlds on Xbox through Game Pass when it had come out. But I wanted to do it on PlayStation. This was like a new updated version, so I thought that would be good. And actually, I didn't really have any problems with it, so maybe the whatever issues people had with it at the when it first came out have been patched. So yeah, I wanted to get it on PS5 and trophy hunt on it. And so that's what I did. Oh, I guess part of the reason that was making me want to play it too was just knowing that the second one was coming. And we saw that again at the Game Awards just last week. So that was cool. But yeah, I was playing through the hell out of it like in May. When we take a look at our PlayStation stats, I think it's gonna be a notable piece of the puzzle there because I really was playing a lot of it there for a period of time, but I didn't actually finish it. Part of the reason was I got kind of bogged down in the DLCs, and then I think my momentum on it stalled once because I was really playing a lot of it because I was trying to beat the timer on the PlayStation Plus thing expiring. But then whenever I was able to get my own copy, I was like, well, there's really no rush anymore. So I definitely kind of took a back seat to some other things. But yeah, that's a really great game. I was thinking about showing it to Reagan here pretty soon. 'Cause she's a fan of Fallout and Mass Effect, which are definitely the two biggest inspirations for the Outer World. So we'll see if we end up doing that. To close out May, and again, trying to maximize my expiring PS Plus premium subscription, I marathon three short old titles that were Parappa the Rapper 2 from May 30th to May 31st, and then also May 31st, R4, Ridge Racer Type 4, and Star Wars Racer Revenge. None of them are amazing games. I enjoyed my time with all of them, though, to some degree. Parappa 2 is mechanically tighter than the first one, but it is also a little bit less endearing, I have to say. Ridge Racer Type 4 was actually my first experience with that series outside of the original arcade cabinet. I'm not sure I actually ever even really played the original arcade cabinet, but I would like, I was a really young kid. I would sit in the, because it was like a one where you sit in it and you had the racing wheel, and I would just like sit in it and watch it go. I think maybe I thought I was playing it. I don't know, but I was really kind of entranced by that arcade cabinet. It might have been my actually my most formative experience with games, even if I wasn't really playing. But yeah, this is my first time like really playing a Ridge Racer game, so that was kind of cool. And then also Star Wars Racer Revenge, that was kind of a blast from the past for me as well, as that was actually the first PlayStation 2 game I ever owned. So yeah, it's a guess I was kind of in a racing mood there. R4 didn't have any trophies, so I blew through that in about an hour. Racer Revenge, though, was a much more hardcore experience. It doesn't have a platinum trophy, but I was going for the 100% trophy list, and that requires unlocking all the secret characters like Darth Maul and Darth Vader, and actually young Anakin, and I think Watto is in there. And that culminated in me trying for hours all night. Like there was this one night where I was trying all night long to beat the best lap on the Boo Team Classic, which is the course that's in Star Wars Episode 1. And it was on the night before I was supposed to go with Reagan to this hot chigger infested field where she interned over the summer. So I was like, once I get through it, I'll just go to bed and then I'll go to this thing. But I just couldn't do it. Could not beat that time, and I didn't that night. I failed. I did suck it up and like with no sleep at all, go to the field, and got the worst chicken bites of my life. Came home, took a nap, and then I went right back to the game. And I did finally beat that course record literally by milliseconds. It was crazy. It was very satisfying to pull off, but man, it was tough. Up there with the toughest things I've ever done in a game. Moving on to June, it was actually, it was completely quiet in terms of starting new games. So there's nothing to say about June. But then we get to July, we kind of got back to it. So July, we started Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage. And actually, we actually turned around and finished that one pretty quickly on August 10th. Then on July 25th, I started up the campaign of Star Wars Battlefront 2, which I turned right around and finished the next day. That was prompted by me and Reagan started watching through all of the Star Wars content on Disney Plus in chronological order. So I was really high on Star Wars at that time, and so I wanted to play some Star Wars games. And Battlefront 2 is canon, and I had never played it, so that made it kind of a top choice. Um, my first impression of the campaign, because I tried it years ago when I'd first bought the game on like a very deep sale, because I don't even know if you can get it on the sales that I got on. I mean, I got this game for like nothing, like $3 or $4. That was like at the bottom of its popularity, which I think has kind of rebounded since then. Yeah, started the campaign back then. I remember just thinking it was terrible. And I after the first mission, I just like gave up. I was like, this is trash. But this time I actually came away fairly impressed when I gave it more of a shot. It's no Halo campaign, but I did like how they mixed in characters that are from the movies, while also telling an original tale of a new character, this Imperial soldier gone rogue. So I actually did end up enjoying that. Then at the end of July, on the 29th, I started The Last of Us, which was right after finishing a lapsed playthrough that I had been working on kind of throughout the year, but that I had started actually way back in like 2019 or 2020. I picked up this playthrough from back whenever I was kind of going for the Platinum Trophy in that game. And it was a Survivor Plus playthrough too, so I was in for some pain there. Um, yeah, and so I'm trying to, and still, there's a couple trophies that I'm missing. So that's why I restarted it here on the 29th. Um, what I'm missing is there's like 13 shiv doors in the game. I'm missing one that I haven't opened, so I haven't been able to get that trophy. And then still have to upgrade a few of Joel's guns. And the reason probably for that is because in the harder difficulties on Survivor, they give you way less material. So I have still, after two whole playthroughs, I haven't got enough materials to upgrade all of his guns. So I bumped that down to easy for this final run. So I'm having no trouble, but I just haven't gone back to it recently. Once I get those, once I figure out what shiv door I'm missing and upgrade those guns, then all I'll have left is the online modes to get that platinum trophy. So I'm not sure how painful that'll be, but that's all I'll have left. On August 1st, I briefly started Final Fantasy VI, the Pixel Remaster version on the PS5. Um, that was a game that was kind of a hangover. Reagan and I had started it actually in 2022 on the SNES Classic, but we abandoned it on my birthday 2023 because I was eager to get to Fallout 3, and it's just sat there neglected ever since. So my plan is to replay it and recording and narrating the main story parts so you can get the full picture that way. I haven't had the time to get back to it, but I am really looking forward to playing that game and getting the platinum trophy. On August 11th is when we finally started Spyro Year of the Dragon, which, as I noted, we haven't quite finished yet, but we are in the final world, and hopefully we'll have that wrapped up here, ideally before the calendar year ends. It's a shame Reagan got frustrated with it because it is definitely my favorite in the series. It's a very special game to me. I kind of think of it as the game that really made me want to get my own PS1 after playing it at my friend Kate's house. Also on August 11th, I just randomly played through Super Mario Kart on my SNES Classic. I think the reason I did that was because I've been reading old issues of Game Informer, and the one of the ones that I read had a guide in the back about how to, like, with tips on how to win all the races in Super Mario Kart. So I was like, what the hell? I'll just blast through this. And the game's okay, but it's obviously much worse than like literally every other game in the series. But so checked it off. On August 17th, which again, I was really into Star Wars over the summer, so I started Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. And part of what put me over the edge to doing that was my cousin Brett, who loves that series, noted he's like, hey, those games are canon, so you really need to experience them if you're going through all the stuff. So I was like, yeah, you're right. But I'm just at the beginning of it. I really haven't gotten into it at all. I'm excited to get back to it. It looks really nice. I'm playing I think no, I guess can't remember if I'm playing the PS5 or the PS4 version because they did update it right for the PS5. It looks really nice. I really like how they mixed and just in that beginning, I really like how they mixed the action with tension. When they did a good job with that. The jury's still out on that main character. I'm not sure about him, but Brett says he's great, so maybe he'll grow on me. On September 3rd, I started my second playthrough of Elden Ring, which I booted up again with the goal, obviously, of playing through Shadow of the Erdtree toward the tail end of that playthrough. But that playthrough was actually replaced later on with a different playthrough. I started with Reagan in November after we finished Bloodborne, and that playthrough is still ongoing. Got about 40 plus hours invested in it. That one's definitely not going to be checked off before the end of the year. On September 5th, in preparation for the release of Astrobot, I played through all of Astro's Playroom again for my third time since I got my PS5. And I got the extra bots that they added as free DLC as well. I've been singing the praises of that game since day one, and I am really happy that that series is finally getting its dues. Now it's one game of the year. Or, not Astro's Playroom, but Astrobot, obviously. Okay, 5 games. I think 5 games left that I started this year. September 9th, I started Pokemon X on a road trip to Colorado with Reagan's side of the family. It's always been my least favorite game in the series. I think I've still only finished it once after all these years. And it is still my least favorite game in the series. It is so dull. I have not touched it since the road trip, and I really don't have a lot of interest in doing that. Except for I do want to kind of create a bridge from my completed Gen 4 Pokedex through Pokemon Bank to Pokemon Home. So, it does kind of require. I guess I could use Sun and Moon instead of X, but I was just kind of using it as an excuse to play X again since I haven't played it in so long. I've only played it once, but man, that is a slog. On September 16th, I had a very brief run with Chess Ultra, which was kind of I got into that a little bit because Reagan had this brief addiction to chess on her phone before she succumbed to the digital version of Wingspan later this year. That asshole of a game wanted me to figure out how to like win games from legendary chess players of the past that they lost, and it was like, okay, he lost this game, now win it. And it was crazy and extremely hard, and I quickly gave up. On September 21st, I finally started Astrobot. I think right now I'm roughly 40% of my way through it. Obviously, I could have easily gotten through it much quicker than that, but I'm just taking my time with it and savoring it and enjoying every second. It's a great game. On October 12th, ahead of our recording of the Reagan Top 25 Games podcast, she and I replayed To the Moon, which, if you've listened to those episodes, we're both very high on it. It's a 3 to 4 hour story game. It's absolutely incredible. Some of the best storytelling I've ever seen in a video game. I think everyone should play it on the platform of their choice, but I will say the remade version on Switch is the best one. So yeah, that To the Moon, can't recommend it enough. And then while it's not a game you can really finish, I will point out I did start up the PS5 version of the board game Wingspan on October 23rd, which Reagan talked about in her top 25. It wouldn't crack my top 100 games, but I have to admit it's an extremely addictive game. So I did play a decent amount of it. I only started a single game in November, but it was a big one. It was Mass Effect, which I'm playing through with Brett as part of a deal he and I made where I play Magic the Gathering with him, which I had to learn, and he's playing Mass Effect with me. The greatest video gaming experience either of us have ever had in our lives is playing through the original Knights of the Old Republic together. And while I reckon, we were kids, kind of kids then, so I recognize this isn't going to be as good as that. But I'm hoping, Brett doesn't know what happens in Mass Effect, so I'm hoping it can kind of recapture at least some of that. But I wish he would come over here so we could play some more. And then on December 10th, it's December 16th as I record this, but December 10th, I blew through the new version of Jack and Daxter on the day of its release on PS5 so that I could immortalize myself as one of the first 50 people to 100% the game on PS5, on PSN profiles. I started it, or I finished it in 3 hours, 21 minutes, and that made me the 16th person to finish it. So I'm locked in there forever. And then at the time, I was the third fastest person to finish it. But that time has dropped to 10th now. So there is some competition there. I saw that two of them were like ridiculously fast, and I originally assumed they were bugged, but then I realized that technically you can do that if you play the PS4 version first and then import your save. So technically, if enough people do that, then I guess I'll get kicked off of the PS5 leaderboard, and that would be kind of frustrating. So maybe I should have done it on the PS4 version instead. But I still can go back and do it on the PS4 version if I want for the speed run. I almost wanted to just play through it twice that day and get on the first 50 achievers for the PS4 version as well. But I was just too busy that day. I didn't have enough time. But I probably will go back into the speed run at some point, which is going to bring the number of times I have platinum that game to 5. But I have no shame in that. I love that game. It was brilliant in 2001, and it is still brilliant today. Finally, on December 11th, Reagan and I started BioShock. So basically, we made a deal. She was running out of time to finish everything that she needed for her school as her semester was ending, and so she asked me to write a couple of short papers for her, and I charged her a free game per essay. And we landed on BioShock as one of them, and then I think we're gonna do the Outer Worlds for the other one. I haven't played through BioShock since 2019, and I'm really enjoying playing through it now. We've only had one session. I'm looking forward to Reagan finding out the truth about Would You Kindly. We'll see if it's as impactful to her as it was to so many in 2007. So you have it. That's all the games that I started in 2024. And while that does give you something of a picture of the games I played this year, it is not the full picture because I also finished games that I had started in prior years. So we're gonna take a look at that list next. All in, I finished 39 games this year that are finishable, 15 of which were new to me. But there's actually more than that because it's not taking into account like kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, where there's like some games that you can't really finish. So that includes the Jackbox games, and then there's some others that I'm going to get to at the end whenever I rank all of the games that I uh, sort of rated this year. Um, Yeah, I got my family started on Jackbox at Christmas 2023. It was actually a gift to my mom who loves playing games with the family. So we've had a lot of fun playing through various packs over the course of the year. We've got two, four, five, six, seven, and eight. So yeah, obviously I didn't count any of them as being beaten in terms of the 39 games I beat this year, but I did give them scores. So we'll get into that a little bit later in the podcast. So the first game I quote unquote beat this year was Mario Party 2 on January 17th, which is also a little bit iffy. You can't really beat Mario Party 2, but I just considered it done when Reagan and I played through each of the boards since it doesn't have a story mode. Not much to say about it really. It's Mario Party. It was better than the first one and worse than the third one, so there you have it. It's a lot of fun to play with friends and family. It's definitely a great game to have on the Switch online service, though I will say. And like I said earlier, that is the reason I got onto it. So as I talked about earlier, we beat Halo Reach and Combat Evolved on January 24th and 26th, respectively. That run was actually broken up on the calendar with my completion of Super Mario Advance 4, which is just a Game Boy Advance version of Super Mario Bros. 3 on February 2nd. This was a pretty big deal, as it was my first playthrough ever of Super Mario Bros. 3. I chose the Game Boy Advance version on Switch Online rather than the original, just because the Game Boy Advance version is on the higher tier subscription, while the other isn't. And also, I actually do have the original on my NES Classic, so the Game Boy Advance one was the more exotic choice, I guess. Um, as for my verdict, of course, I had a fine time with it, but honestly, I didn't like it as much as Super Mario World or even the original Super Mario Bros. I thought some of the level designs were questionable compared to those games, and frankly, the game lacks the charm of World and it lacks the nostalgia I have for the original, so that just kind of leaves it out in the cold a little bit. I think I'm also somewhat hard on it because of how often it is put up on a pedestal as one of the greatest games of all time. I don't think any of the 2D Mario games, now 3D is a different story. For the 2D Mario games, I don't think any of them should be anywhere near that discussion, least of all Super Mario Bros. 3. It's just a prime example of people elevating games on a curve purely thanks to nostalgia, which is a practice I can't abide. I wouldn't even call Super Mario Bros. 3 a very significant game for like the history of video games either, since it wasn't the first on the NES or the first Mario game in general. And that game is very significant, and it wasn't Super Mario World, which is the first on a new system, which was less significant, but it was a pack-in game, so that made it kind of a big deal. I guess Mario Bros. 3 kind of devised the overworld structure that many of the Mario games have followed since, but it's kind of a hollow point because you can't go back and play the games. They're the levels that you've completed. So I don't know. It's a game that people really liked when they were kids, I guess, and that carries through today on a lot of lists. Anyway, moving on, I also we'll kind of run through these other ones that I mentioned earlier. So Halo 2 on February 2nd, Halo 3 ODST on February 9th, Halo 3 on February 11th, and then Mario Party 3 on February 16th. Mario Party 3 was kind of an interesting one since it actually does have a single player mode. I do have some nostalgia for Mario Party 3 compared to the others in the early series. Mario Party 5 is one I have the most nostalgia for, um, but I actually did have Mario Party 3 on the Nintendo 64 back in the day. It's got great boards and mini games, and its inclusion of a story mode, even though it's pretty bare bones, was I think laudable. It's cool to have that as a bonus. I would frankly say that it's better than Super Mario Bros. 3. I mean, it does have a twist villain, so it's not too bad. On February 18th, Reagan and I finished Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I just kind of included finishing that in terms of playing all of the tracks, and that included and by playing all the tracks, like winning all the tracks, basically. I think there might have been one cup where I came in second, but yeah, I played through all the tracks in the game, and that includes the ones that were on the Switch Online and expansion pack subscription. So like the expansion that they did. It was an amazing experience. I never thought that I would put a kart racer above Crash Team Racing, but Mario Kart 8 is definitely deserving of that title. Just the sheer amount of content in that game, especially with those DLC courses, is staggering, and the sheer quality bar of those tracks is just impressive. My favorite is Yoshi's Island, which was one of the original Nintendo tracks that they developed for the new DLCs. It's just very creative and fun, but really so are pretty much all the courses as well. It's an absolutely brilliant game that is worthy of the insane amount of sales it's garnered. Let's see. My cat's getting up here, trying to derail things. Next day after finishing Mario Kart 8, I finished The Wolf Among Us, which Reagan and I had actually started toward the tail end of 2023, and then we finished here. Um, these semi-adventure games like Heavy Rain, and then of course the Telltale games are kind of Reagan's favorite genre, so she really got hooked by this one. I think it's a great game. It lacks the emotional and storytelling punch of Heavy Rain for me, but it's solid. An interesting thing about it is that I've played it 3 times, but I've never played it by myself. The first time was with Sean on a long lost playthrough for Wildfire Gaming. The second was with my grandmother, and then the third was this year. So I don't think I'm ever probably gonna bother playing it on my own either, except for I do need to clean up some little bits and pieces of it for the platinum, because it's not like most of the Telltale games where you just automatically get it. You actually have to do some other things to get it. So I will have to do that. So as I mentioned earlier, on February 21st, I finished Fire Emblem, and that was followed by Halo 4 on February 23rd. On February 27th, I finished The Last of Us Part 2, technically the remastered version. I've played the game 3 times before this, but this was the playthrough where Brett was watching me play, and he was kind of using that as the experience for him to see the story because he didn't know what was going to happen. As I expected, he was not crazy about the Abby twist, but in the end, he had to admit that it was an amazing storytelling device. He got frustrated playing through the original himself, even though I was there with him the whole time. That's why he just preferred to just watch me play through the second one. He figured he'd just experience the story and not get frustrated with the gameplay. Personally, as much as I love the original Last of Us, I think the second one is better in every way. I'm really looking forward to really getting into the remaster version because, like I said, I kind of dipped my toe in it there at the end of that playthrough. We actually started it on the PS4 version, but then, like at the end, that last session, we did bump it up to the PS5 version because it just happened to come out in between those times. But yeah, the remastered version has like the developer commentary on there. That's really exciting. It has a new platinum for me to get. And then it has that new roguelike mode as well. All that sounds amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, on March 8th, Reagan and I finished our playthrough of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. She'd already talked about that on her top 25 list. But so, go back and listen to that if you want to hear what she had to say about that. On April 17th, I finished Pokemon White 2. This was another situation where Reagan and I were playing through the originals at the same time at first. We started them in 2023, but she was so slow, I was actually able to lap her and complete White 2 in the amount of time it took her to play just Black. That was actually my first time playing through Black and White 2. I've really liked the original Black and White, but I will say in White 2, the amount of recycled content in it definitely did hold back my enjoyment a bit. It's still a solid time, definitely better than X and Y, but definitely some of the weaker Pokemon games, I would say. So we have a run of games we've already discussed here. We had Observation on April 29th, Pokemon Red on May 1st, Parappa the Rapper and Star Wars Rebel Assault 2 The Hidden Empire on May 5th, and The Artful Escape on May 13th. However, on May 30th, I finished the story, or whatever the hell it's called, of Tetris Effect. I think it's called Journey Mode. Yeah, Tetris Effect. So that was the first time I had managed to beat it on the normal difficulty. And it's really just because that last level is really tough. I came away frustrated by my early experiences with Tetris Effect just because I could not beat that final level on normal. But this time I really came away with it with a much more fond impression. It's definitely my favorite way to play Tetris, which is obvious for visual and audio reasons. And plus, beyond just like that journey mode, it has a lot of other fun modes that you can check out beyond the story mode. That's really great. It's just a great, very complete version of Tetris. Unfortunately, it's also a contender for like the hardest platinum trophy ever. So I don't see myself ever getting even close to that. But trophies aren't everything. It's a good game. May 31st was my most productive single day of the year. I rolled credits on Parappa the Rapper 2, R4 Ridge Racer Type 4, and Star Wars Racer Revenge, all of which I discussed earlier. Next up, though, was a huge one, which was Octopath Traveler 2 on June 18th. That playthrough was almost a year in the making. I absolutely savored my time with this masterpiece, and what a masterpiece it is. The story, characters, music, combat, and RPG mechanics are all some of the best I've ever seen in any game. And just when I thought I had seen all the game had to offer, the developers went in and added 4 extra ultra difficult battles as a bonus this year. So even though I have the platinum, I still have to beat that very last super boss, which is easily the hardest foe I've ever faced in a turn-based video game. But the difficulty of the added challenges aside, Octopath Traveler 2 it's just pure magic to still know a video game. If you are even the slightest fan of JRPGs, you must try it. I cheated a bit with my next entry, which is Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney on June 27th, which, I kind of talked about earlier. Technically, I haven't really finished it since the US version added the 5th trial that we haven't gotten through quite yet. But the Japanese original did not include this. The story kind of feels like it ends after the 4th one, so I took it as a win. We're close on the 5th trial, so hopefully we'll check that one off soon too. Rounding out the rest of July, I finished Spyro the Dragon. At some point, I actually forgot to write down exactly when that was. Psychonauts on July 16th, Star Wars Battlefront 2 on July 26th, and The Last of Us 1 on July 29th. Then on August, I checked off Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage on August 10th, and Super Mario Kart on August 11th. But that wasn't it for August. On August 23rd, I actually checked off Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide Edition Stairway to the Destined Duel on Game Boy Advance. I guess I had technically started that playthrough in 2023. It basically has no story, but it does have an ending, which is very hard to achieve. You have to really grind a lot to get to it. But I pulled it off with this pretty busted deck I had put together. I love deck builders, and it all really kind of goes back to my formative days with Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid, thanks in part to this game, which I consider to be an underrated Game Boy Advance classic and a perfect example of a great mobile game. Outside of Pokemon, this has to be my most played Game Boy Advance game, and with good reason. It is satisfying and addictive as hell. On September 5th, I finished Astro's Playroom, which I talked about earlier, and that was followed by another big feather in the cap on September 22nd with Chained Echoes. This was another epic JRPG experience that was a year in the making, and it impressed me to such a degree that it did crack my top 25 games of all time, which I discussed in episode 2 of this very podcast. It doesn't quite have the emotional core of Octopath Traveler 2, but in virtually every other way, it is just as good and perhaps even more satisfying to complete 100% thanks to its truly awesome command board, or so the reward board, I think is what they call it. It's like it's just checklist system built into the game. Those are the two games I'd say have the best turn-based combat I've ever experienced. Octopath Traveler 2 and Chained Echoes. I don't think either of them get credit for being as good as they are. But that's such is the fate for being an underrated indie gem. It's Chain Echo is just another game you simply must try if you have an affinity for JRPGs. It is one of the best of the genre. And then while I already noted, Reagan and I played through To the Moon on October 12th. That was also the day that we finished our co-op run of Spiritfarer, which is a playthrough that we started all the way back in the first half of 2022. Spiritfarer isn't quite the narrative masterpiece To the Moon is, but it is a satisfying sort of quote unquote cozy game. It's what people like these days. And it does its best with mixed results to pack an emotional punch while mixing in, kind of management semi aspects and settlement building and exploration. It's a unique game that works great either in co op or as a single player experience. I've beaten it once each way. And then finally, to close out the year, I finished up Bloodborne on November 1st, and then, of course, Jack and Daxter on December 10th. So that's kind of all the games that I beat this year that are games that I can beat. We're going to go into the games that I platinumed this year, and then I'm going to kind of wrap things up here with ranking all of the games that I finished. That's going to include some other kind of more niche games that you'll kind of see what I mean when we get to that list. That list actually has a few more entries on it than the 40 or so we've heard so far. But before we get into that, I wanted to take a look at my Xbox and PlayStation Wrapped, which is kind of like they're following like the Spotify trend of giving you your stats at the end of the year. I have looked at these, but I've kind of forgotten a lot of the information. So I'm going to start with the Xbox one because I imagine that one is going to have a lot less going on than the PlayStation one. So here we are, the year in review 2024. They called me a big time brawler. It says there's no better feeling than winning a huge battle with your friends. So there you go. It says Fallout New Vegas is my number one game for 2024. So that's not surprising. I have 88 hours played on my Xbox for the year. Only 4 games played. It says I earned 11 achievements, which corresponds to 150 gamer score, and my busiest month was March. All of my time was spent on console. I didn't play it on any other stuff that they're trying to call Xboxes these days. 55% of it was role playing, probably New Vegas. 42% shooter, 2% action and adventure, and 1% other. So apparently, even with just 88 hours, that puts me in the top 25% for time played on among all Xbox users. So, oof, that doesn't sound too good. But anyway, top games. I guess we'll start from the bottom here. Number 3 was Fortnite, and that was with 2 hours played. That's actually the first time and only time that I've ever played Fortnite. I did like a round of Fortnite on my birthday. So we had a guest over that wanted to see me play it. So there you go. Then my number 2 was Halo, the Master Chief Collection. I put 37 hours into that and earned 6 achievements worth 65 gamer score. Top achievement was Those Left Behind. It doesn't tell me what that means, but only 0.72% of players have unlocked it. So that's pretty cool. I was in the top 10% of the most active players on the Master Chief Collection with 37 hours. And then my top game was Fallout New Vegas. My time played was 49 hours. Got 5 achievements in that for 85 gamer score. Top achievement was the courier who broke the bank, which only 5.24% of players have unlocked. I will say that those hours and all that stuff, oh, and 10%, top 10% of New Vegas players. I will say all that is not really accurate because I did play through the game some with Reagan, but that those stats are definitely bloated because Reagan's brother Hank came over and played it some this year, and to the point where I wonder if actually the Master Chief Collection would have been my number one if he hadn't done that. But regardless, according to the Xbox stats, that's what we're looking at here. And then my number 4 game was Fallout 3, which I don't think I actually played this year. I think I might have just booted up or something. And there's a welcome message, or there's a thank you message from Phil, which we'll skip. And there you go. That's what I did on my Xbox this year. So not a particularly busy game for me on Xbox, but not really surprising. But now let's go and take a look at my PlayStation Wrapped. PlayStation 2024 wrap up. Let's go. It says I joined in 2013. I had my obviously I had my PS3 before that, but that was whenever I first connected it to the internet. But here we go. In 2024, it says I played 52 games. That's 23 PS5 games and 29 PS4 games. Um, and it says from the start of my account, I played 119 games. So there you go. But my first game that I played on PlayStation this year was Octopath Traveler 2 on January 10th. So right around the time I got home from my honeymoon, I was playing some Octopath Traveler 2, which is time well spent, I would say. Moving on, let's see what we have here. My top 5 games for PlayStation this year. Number 5 was Octopath Traveler 2. I was actually surprised to see that with 47 hours on Octopath Traveler 2. I was surprised to see that, but then I realized, well, about half or maybe even more than half of the time that I spent playing that game was in 2023. So, all in total, I have over 100 hours in the game, but for this year, 47. And that included 21 trophies, and that was accounted for 7% of my total playtime this year on PlayStation. Number 4 is Elden Ring with 53 hours. Didn't get any trophies because I already had the Platinum trophy, but that accounted for 8% of my playtime. Number 3 with 56 hours was Star Wars Battlefront 2. It's 35 trophies, almost all of them. I'm just missing one single trophy left other than the Platinum in Star Wars Battlefront 2, which is reaching rank 50 on the multiplayer mode, and I'm getting pretty close on that. I think I'm in the 40s. So I got to get back to that and finish that one up. But yeah, that accounted for 8% of my playtime as well. My number 2 with 65 hours is Spyro Reignited Trilogy with a 10% playtime, but that's almost all Reagan. She just played on my profile, which we should have put it on her profile, but didn't think about it. So yeah, it would never take me 65 hours to get through the 3 Spyro games, but she's a lot slower than I am. And then number 1, unsurprisingly, with 92 hours, is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I've earned 39 trophies in that game so far, and it accounts for 14% of my playtime. So those are my top 5 games on PlayStation. It says I spent 37% of my time in the expansive worlds and immersive narratives of RPGs, and my gaming style was role player. I would say that is accurate. Okay, this is cool. So my 2024 gaming calendar, we're going to check out playtimes, trophies, and more for each month. So in January, my game of the month was Octopath Traveler 2, which I only spent 7 hours in January, but that was enough for it to be my game of the month. It says I had 21 sessions, 16 hours total, 6 games played, and 7 trophies earned. So not my most active month. Then in February, my game of the month was The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered with 8 hours, had 27 gaming sessions in February, 30 hours logged, 15 games played, and 58 trophies unlocked. In March, my game of the month was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with 15 hours. I had 26 gaming sessions, 36 hours logged, 5 games played, and 36 trophies earned. In April, my game of the month was Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut with 14 gaming sessions, 41 hours logged, 44 games played. I don't know how that makes any sense. And 30 trophies earned. In May, my game of the month was the Outer Worlds Spacer Choice Edition with 33 hours, 58 gaming sessions, 82 hours logged, 13 games played, and 84 trophies earned. My top month of the year was June, and my game of the month for June was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with 23 hours, 68 gaming sessions, 97 hours logged, 12 games played, and 34 trophies earned. In July, my game of the month was Star Wars Battlefront 2 with 31 hours. That's 59 gaming sessions, 86 hours logged, 13 games played, and 67 trophies earned. In August, my game of the month was the Spyro Reignited trilogy, which, kind of like I mentioned earlier, is just really just Reagan playing it. But um, 52 gaming sessions, 77 hours logged, 14 games played, and 17 trophies earned. In September, my game of the month was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with 15 hours played, 35 gaming sessions, 41 hours logged, 8 games played, 28 trophies earned. In October, my game of the month was Bloodborne with 33 hours, 30 gaming sessions, 63 hours logged, 7 games played, 42 trophies earned. In November, my game of the month was Elden Ring with 46 hours, 35 gaming sessions, 54 hours logged, 4 games played, 0 trophies earned in November. Oof, was slipping there. And then in December, my game of the month was Wingspan. Had 9 sessions, 16 hours logged, 3 games played, and 31 trophies earned, despite the low number of hours there. A lot of those were probably Wingspan trophies. So that was an interesting little look there. Let's see, what's next? In total, it says I've played 642 hours, 629 of them on the PlayStation 5 across 450 play sessions and 52 games played. I put in 48 hours on the PlayStation Portal remote player with 91 play sessions and 12 games played. I think the one that I probably played the most on this Portal was The Outer Worlds. I spent a lot of time playing that on the Portal. And then, believe it or not, I actually have 13 hours logged on my trusty old PlayStation 4 with 11 play sessions and 1 game played, and that game is The Last of Us Remastered. And that's because that's the save file that goes all the way back to, like I said, 2020, where I was trying to get the Platinum Trophy in The Last of Us, and I can't actually move that forward. I can move the save forward, but it doesn't keep track of all the things that I've gotten in terms of the completion percentage. So, stuck playing it on PlayStation 4 until I get everything that I need. Okay, in 2024, I earned 434 trophies. That included, it says 6 platinums. I think it's actually 7 platinums. 41 gold, 106 silver, 281. My trophy level increased 12 levels from 329 to 341. It says that my lifetime trophy count is 3,928. So I want to use this as my time to just kind of quickly take a look at the games that I got platinums in and take a ranking, or not so much a ranking of those, but just kind of go through those really fast. So the first platinum that I got this year was on May 5th, which was Parappa the Rapper. As I noted, this is not an easy platinum, but I will say it was very satisfying to get. Everyone who has played Parappa knows that song 4 with the baking chicken, definitely the hardest song by far. But the toughest trophy actually was turning a bad performance into a cool one, which requires, kind of bombing at first and then freestyling to a good enough degree to impress the game, which seems inconsistent at best and random at worst, but it sure felt good to pull it off. My second platinum on May 13th was for the Artful Escape. For the most part, this one is just a gimme. The game takes absolutely no skill and nothing is really missable. But yep, that was another platinum I got. But my third platinum, which is the one that's not included in my wrap up stats because it was on the PlayStation 3, was on July 5th, and that was Fallout 3. This one was so long in the making, my PlayStation literally doesn't know how long it was because I hadn't even connected my PS3 to Wi Fi yet when I started getting trophies in the game. I hadn't set up my account or anything. It was over the summer, and I can't even really remember why I decided to do this, but I decided to finally go in and clean up that trophy list and lock in this decade plus platinum in the making. And all I had to do was discover 50 locations, make one of each of the craftable weapons, and kill all 5 of the game's super mutant behemoths. So it was really fun to finally check that off, and I actually have 2 more trophies for a full 100% because I have the Game of the Year edition, so I have trophies beyond the ones that you need for the platinum. And they are reaching level 30. They're both reaching level 30, one with a neutral karma and one with good karma. So I think both of them should be achievable on the same character if I just kind of keep my current character going and use a little bit of save scum in there toward the end. Um, yeah, like I said, I don't think the PlayStation Wrapped actually counted that one because it's a PS3 game. But it sure is a special one for me in my trophy collection. Platinum number 4 on July 21st was Octopath Traveler 2. As satisfying as it was to check this one off, it did feel like a little bit of a haul of victory since they added those super bosses right around the time I did that, and that last one is still sitting there for me unbeaten. But outside of that, though, playing through this game was an absolute pleasure, as was getting the platinum trophy. It doesn't really require much to get the platinum, other than completing the story with each of the characters and beating all the optional bosses. which everybody should do anyway. But don't forget to collect all of the records for Partitio's record player. I mean, why wouldn't you? And platinum number 5 was Chained Echoes on September 22nd. While I did prefer Octopath Traveler 2 as a game, Chained Echoes definitely had the more satisfying platinum experience thanks to that reward board that I mentioned earlier. It just makes everything in the game just like a satisfying crossword puzzle of rewards and bonuses. It's really great. As I noted in my Platinum Trophy episode, completion experiences really just don't get much better than that, and neither do JRPGs or any games for that matter. Platinum number 6 was Spiritfarer on October 12th. While I had technically completed this game already, I'd gotten all of the achievements. It was on Xbox with its inferior system, so it was nice to add Spiritfarer to my much more prized trophy collection on PlayStation. So yeah, it's great to be able to play that one again. And then number 7, seventh platinum trophy for me was Jack and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy on December 10th. This was my 4th time platinum it, and I will continue to platinum it as many times as Sony wants to put it out with new trophy lists for me to platinum. For both trophy lists and collectathon platformers, Jack and Daxter is near the top of the heap. And then there were 3 other games this year that do not have platinum trophies, but that I got 100% in. There was Observation, April 29th, which is too bad it didn't count as a platinum, because getting 100% actually was a decent amount of work, and it really involved combing the spacecraft that you're in to find all the collectibles and note entries, many of which are missable. You definitely don't want to even go for that one without a guide because you will miss something, I'm telling you. But I do recommend it as it does flesh out the story and the characters significantly. Then on June 1st was Star Wars Racer Revenge. No platinum there, but getting those final 2 trophies, definitely the hardest thing I did in video games this year. Getting that best lap time on the Booty Classic at times felt impossible, but sure was a load off to pull it off. And then on December 7th, so very recently, I got all of the trophies in To the Moon, which is another one that doesn't have a platinum, but does have 100%. It's about as good as it gets for storytelling in games, but its trophy list is not as good as it gets. All it really asks you to do is complete each puzzle perfectly, which means looking up the solution. And to get through the games, there's like a few gimmicky sequences that it wants you to get through them in a certain way. But even that appears to be bugged, as one of them asks you to get through it without getting hit, and I got hit a bunch of times and still got the trophy. But you know, trophy's trophy, I suppose. I recommend making your first playthrough of To the Moon on Switch if you can. It's the best version, and it doesn't have any of these dumb trophies nagging on you while you play. So that was my trophy experience. But then also here on the PlayStation wrap up, it does give you a trophy milestone look, which this is kind of cool. It doesn't worry about the platinum trophies, just like trophies that you got along the way. So on January 12th was when I got my first trophy, which was Clear Skies complete, which I got for completing Hikari's story in Octopath Traveler 2. So yeah, I was basically like wrapping up the game at the beginning of the year. But I still put in another 47 hours or whatever it was. Oh man, that game is something else. My 10th trophy this year was in The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered on February 4th, 2024, which was Journeyman. Find all of the training manuals. So there you go. My 25th trophy was The Wolf Among Us, February 19th, 2024. No Respect for the Dead, complete episode 2, Smoke and Mirrors. Number 50, or my 50th trophy was Star Wars Racer Revenge on February 28th, 2024. Most Deadly, achieved 7 KOs in one 3-lap race. I do remember doing that one. My 100th trophy was on March 31st, 2024 in Chained Echoes, which was Preacher Man. Find 12 class emblems. I do remember that. My 200th trophy was on May 30th, 2024 on Tetris Effect Connected, which was Don't Stop Believin', complete Area 4 of Journey Mode. My 300th trophy on July 27th, 2024 was in Stars Battlefront 2, which was Strike Back, win a match of Strike. I do remember doing that. I think that's like the just kind of team-based deathmatch mode, which nobody really plays in Battlefront 2, but I did have to get in there for a game there. My 400th trophy was on October 25th, 2024, and it was in Wingspan, which was build 2 birds with 1 stone, and that is involved playing 2 birds in 1 turn. That's pretty early on, I think. And then my latest trophy is the Platinum Trophy for Jack and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy, December 10th, 2024, which is called We Did It, Dax. Unlock all trophies in Jack and Daxter. So there you go. That's my trophy milestones from PlayStation. See if there's anything else here that's interesting. For social stats, it says I put in 36 multiplayer hours. All those were Battlefront 2. Joined 3 parties, did 1 broadcast. I think I actually did a couple broadcasts, but I guess only one of them was tied to my account. 20 sent 20 messages and made 11 new friends. So there you go. Apparently, I did 23 PlayStation Stars campaigns. Not that anybody cares about that. So you go. That's PlayStation 2024 wrap up. So it's cool that they do that. I really like that little trend, and it's cool to kind of take a look back. And I think that was a better one than even the normal, giving me like the trophy milestones and stuff. That was a lot of fun. Okay, now for the big finale here is going to be my game of the year ranking for 2024. Um, which is a little bit odd considering it's not with 2024 games. 2024 was actually a notable year for me in that it was the first year in which I have not finished a single game for the year since 1986, which, if you're keeping score, is 8 years before I was even born. I guess you can kind of count Wingspan, which you don't really finish. I certainly played enough for that one for it to count. So I guess I will. So there you go. There's one game I finished in 2024. But on the whole, 2024 was definitely an outlier for me in terms of not getting through any of the major releases in the year of itself. I will definitely finish Astrobot and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth at some point, and there's probably some other games like Metaphor that I'll get to eventually. But for now, since I can't rank my actual games of 2024, I thought it would be fun to rank all of the games that I did finish this year. So with that, let's get to it. And we're going all the way down to number 54. So there's 54 games that are rankable, I feel. And number 54 is a game called Scramble. Which let's a little bit of story time here. The early part of my year was dominated by my nightly reading of the 2010 edition of the 1001 Video Games You Must Play Before You Die book. Um, when I started out reading it, it was like a really interesting history lesson about a lot of old games that I had never played or even heard of. But I got to be honest, it did quickly devolve into a book of asinine takes and a celebration of gaming simplicity over quality, I found. They were elevating a lot of games that were simple and that anybody could play instead of games that are like really great, you know? So, you know, it was a mixed bag for sure. But anyway, because of that book, I did seek out some kind of classic old games that the book highlighted and played through or tried out some of them. And the worst of those was this game called Scramble. Scramble is actually a pretty important game in terms of gaming history. It's actually the first forced scrolling side shooter that has multiple distinct levels. So that's boy, did the people was that influential? I mean, like for what, 2 decades? Well, not 2 decades, at least a decade, probably a decade and a half at least. That was like the genre, right? Was going to the right and the level would scroll and go through levels that way. It was you're on a ship, so it's not a platformer, but this is like 4 years before Super Mario Bros. So yeah, it's just pretty significant innovation here. Um, Unfortunately, it's also very clearly designed in a world before developers really had a grasp on what good game design was. So it's not a particularly fun game to play. You can drop bombs, but the trajectory of the bombs is like almost impossible to predict. And when you combine that with the requirement to constantly bomb these fuel tanks as you go through the levels to power your vehicle for longer than like a few seconds because you run out of fuel like immediately, it results in a pretty poor experience overall. I made it to the second of the game's 6 levels here today. I replayed it for just a quick run just to remind myself of what it was like. Got to level 2 and stopped there, and I think I'm good. So that's Scramble, number 54. Number 53, I have Facade. Now, if you want to know what an AI future might look like, give a shot to Facade, which is an internet-based game that was once heralded. This came out like in the 2000s, mid 2000s, 2005 maybe. It was once heralded by a select few blowhards, and like the authors of 1001 Video Games, as a look at the future of video games and storytelling. And it was impressive in terms of what it was trying to do. It lets you type anything that you want to type to this couple in this apartment, which you're like visiting them. They've been arguing, and you're kind of trying to help them save their marriage or not save their marriage, whatever you want to do. You can literally say anything you want to them. But the truth is, neither of them have any idea what you're saying 95% of the time, which leads to the quote unquote gameplay being really nothing more than screaming into a void at a couple of brain dead bots. They understand you about as well as a Goomba did in 1985. So that's Facade, number 53 on this list. Number 52 is Yai Air Kung Fu, or Yai R Kung Fu. That released in 1984, and it is one of the first fighting games ever made. So in that sense, it is a fascinating history piece. It's bolstered by surprisingly solid gameplay compared to what you would expect for games at the time. Unfortunately, compared to what you would expect from games of this time, it's dreadful, but it still might be worth checking out for history buffs, particularly for fans of fighting games, which I must say I am not. Number 51, I have Star Wars Rebel Assault 2: The Hidden Empire, which is pretty crazy that it beat any of these games, but honestly, I would rather play it than those three below it. As I said earlier, I do have some nostalgia for it, but there is absolutely no defending this hunk of junk. Acting in the FMV scenes is hilariously terrible and good for a few laughs, but the gameplay itself is just rote arcade shooting, none of which is particularly responsive. Only the hardest of the hardcore Star Wars fans should check this out, and only then it's really just to marvel at the atrocity that is this game more than anything else. But I do think it is hilarious that you can play this on a PS5 today, though. That is absurd. Number 50 is Time Pilot. This is another classic arcade game recommended by the geniuses of the 1001 Video Games exhibit. Time Pilot actually is pretty fun, though. It's a tough as nails aerial combat dogfighter that sees players dodging squadrons of enemies and then the larger boss craft when you get to the end of a level. It's got 5 levels, and you also are saving parachuting friendly, so you can see the influence that this probably had on like all of the kind of aerial 2D games. Definitely something like Resogun, for instance, would definitely be inspired by this. Um, but really, when you play it, what you typically do is you try to do that and then you get blown to bits every few seconds. I will say it can be satisfying to get a run going for that lasts more than a few seconds. And I did accomplish that here whenever I tried it out here just tonight. The mechanics are overall pretty clunky though, and it's obviously a very rote game by today's standards. So nothing that you really would want to play for an extended period of time in 2024. Number 49 on this list is a game called Pinball Dreams. This is again was a recommendation from the 1001 Video Games, and I kind of think of it as an example of how it's just not a very good list that they put together. I bought it on my Vita. I think it was really a PSP game, but you could play it on the Vita. I don't know why anyone would want to play this pinball game over like so many others that have come out since then that are better. Um, I guess they wouldn't. They just wouldn't want to do that. So, but here there were those guys in those books talking about how it's great. So I gave it a shot. Number 48, I have Jackbox Party Pack 5. This is one of the 5 party packs that I purchased. And of those, I would say 5 is the only one that isn't at least pretty good. Not that there isn't fun to be had here in some small bursts. Madverse City has the occasional hint of fun, though the time to input often isn't worth the payoff. It takes a long time to write those verses. And then Split the Room is a decent time, but while the Twilight Zone theming is solid, I found the game itself to be pretty dull. So that just leaves You Don't Know Jack Full Stream, which is by far the worst of the Jackbox trivia games I've tried. You got the Overlong, patently stupid. It's way too long, and not very good. And then the poorly advised Zeeple Dome, which just plays like a very unresponsive Angry Birds. So just about any pack that you can purchase is better than that one. Number 47, I have Super Mario Kart. Not a whole lot to say about the original Super Mario Kart. The tracks are repetitive, the graphics are not very good, tracks are flat, and the driving mechanics are rudimentary. But that said, gotta give credit for spawning a genre, and realistically, you probably could still have some fun with this in a multiplayer session today, but I don't know why you'd want to do that when you could play literally any other Mario Kart. Number 46, I have Parappa the Rapper. Parappa is often held up as a beloved PlayStation icon from the early PlayStation. Like many games from that era, that position is earned by nostalgia and charm more than anything else. The game itself is charming, and it's held together by a surprisingly entertaining and ridiculous story. And it's complete with some of the most hilariously terrible voice acting I've ever heard, maybe even worse than that Star Wars game, Rebel Assault 2. Um, Unfortunately, the gameplay mechanics themselves aren't great. The input response is poor. The optional freestyling is a good concept, but uneven in execution, as the game has no apparent rhyme or reason for accepting your inputs as quote unquote cool. Parappa is one of those games you should check out for the experience, particularly if you're interested in your PlayStation history, but as a rhythm game, it is lacking at best. Then at 45, I have Parappa the Rapper 2. I don't think Parappa 2 has quite the heart and charm of the original, but I do have to give it points for working better mechanically as a rhythm game. So unlike the original, at least this one does seem to actually register the inputs properly. It also has the stronger music of the two. Chop Chop Master Onion's love song is a surprising and hilarious scorcher that I will not be forgetting anytime soon. Number 44, I have the Jackbox Party Pack 4. It's my most recent Jackbox purchase, not my best. Having exhausted many of what are probably the best packs already. Party Pack 4 has some solid content, but when Fibbage is the best game in the pack, considering it's fairly widely available in other packs, that's not a great sign. Bracketeering is a fun little game that's probably next up, but it's certainly no pull mine. Monster Seeking Monster probably works pretty well in the right group, but it is a little bit awkward in a family setting, which is where I typically play these. Survive the Internet is good for a laugh or two, but nowhere near as funny as I was hoping. And then Civic Doodle is just kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel for Jackbox games. It feels like kind of half of a concept of a game at best. So there's fun to be had here, but by no means should Party Pack 4 be anywhere near your first stop in this series. Number 43, I have R4 Ridge Racer Type 4. While the story mode of the game is really short, clocking it at just over an hour if you do well and watch your replays, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a fun time, and surprisingly had more story than I expected through like the dialogue you have with your sponsor. The soundtrack is memorable too. I still sometimes hum the title track, and I literally have one night of play with this thing in my life, so that's pretty impressive. It also has two types of car handling. You have the traditional drift that is associated with Ridge Racer traditionally, and then you also have this grip style of driving or handling. The drift is definitely, like I said, more utilized through the series, but I actually used a grip car on my playthrough, and I actually haven't played through any of the other games in the series, so I feel like I'm still kind of missing out on that quintessential Ridge Racer experience. So maybe I'll replay it sometime or just try another game in the series. Number 42, I have Star Wars Racer Revenge. So maybe I'm a little bit hard on it, but after all, it did provide me with the greatest challenge of the year and a memorable experience that I'll probably never forget. But that said, it is woefully short, and while the grind to unlock all the characters is engaging, it requires multiple runs through the same, they're well designed tracks, but you kind of have to keep going through the same one, so that's kind of a bummer. It's a solid time from beginning to end, and it's an interesting footnote in my own history since it's my first ever PS2 game, but to call it much more than that would be a stretch. Number 41, Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3. I've probably already drawn enough of the ire of classic Mario fans with my dunking on Mario 3 earlier in this episode, so I'll just say it's a fun little platformer that, while nowhere near one of the greatest games ever made, like, seriously, it's not even in the top 200 games that I personally have played, much less of all time. There is still fun to be had here. Just not as much as could be found in literally hundreds, if not thousands, of other places. Number 40, I have Mario Party 2. Mario Party 2 was an improvement upon its predecessor in every way. It has better, more intricate boards, all of which pack a hell of a lot more charisma and charm through their strong theming. It also introduced items, albeit players can only carry one at a time. However, most of its minigames are the same as the first Mario Party, so it really kind of feels more like an expansion pack to the original, with fewer boards, I might add, than a fully fledged sequel. Number 39, I have Luminous Remastered. Tetris Effects 4-Bear. Luminous is perhaps the most memorable of the PSP launch titles, which we talked about on that episode. Like its superior younger brother, Luminous's mix of music with flashy visuals makes for a strong combination. But this game does lack the cerebral core gameplay loop of Tetris. But number 39, not bad. Number 38, I have Mario Party Superstars on Switch. Superstars has a lot going for it. Bringing back classic boards is a good idea, but it is disappointing that they stopped at just 5. More impressive is the strong selection of minigames from Mario Party history, the majority of which are legitimately among the best in the series. They added flourishes like emotive stickers, which are a nice touch as well, and like many first-party Nintendo releases on Switch, the game looks surprisingly pretty to boot. Number 37, I have Mario Party 3. 3 lacks some of the charm of Mario Party 2 and its level theming, but it makes up for it with stronger minigames, added strategy depth on the board itself, particularly thanks to the ability to hold up to 3 items instead of just 1. And then as an added bonus, its single-player story mode is a surprisingly tense and solid time, though it is hard to recommend compared to the other hundreds of other superior single-player experiences you can have in 2024. Regardless, Mario Party 3 is without question the quintessential of the Nintendo 64 classic Mario parties and can be a hell of a good time with a full group of 4. At number 36, I have Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage. This is what I would consider the black sheep of the Spyro trilogy. Spyro 2 is still a fun time when it gets out of its own way, but it does have a tough time doing that at times through some of its annoyingly constructed orb challenges. Beyond that, much of the level designs here are just the weakest of the Insomniac trilogy. The pacing's off. It just has 3 hub worlds compared to Spyro 3's 4 and Spyro 1's 7. And then the collectibles themselves are just these boring orbs and talismans instead of like living, breathing dragons. So you shouldn't skip Spyro 2 if you want the full Spyro experience, but you will have to get through some, you know, borderline unfun sections to do it. Still a solid game, but yeah, definitely a lot worse than the other two. Number 35, I have Jackbox Party Pack 2. If you pick up some of the newer packs, Party Pack 2 does get harder to recommend, as its biggest draws are Quiplash and Fibbage, which are also available in other packs. That said, Party Pack 2's exclusive collection of Bidiots, Earwax, and Bomb Corp are all solid experiences that have all resulted in fond memories and belly laughs. So it might still be worth picking up on a sale. And today, this was an amazing release. Today, it's still a damn solid one. Number 34, I have Drawful 2. I have Drawful 2 here ranked by itself because it is a standalone game on all the digital storefronts on which it appears. I prefer Party Pack 8's Drawful Animate, but Drawful 2 is less work and it goes by quicker since you don't have to draw two full frames of animation. I don't think the prompts are quite as good in Drawful 2, but they are still strong, and it's hard not to have a fun time playing this game. Number 33, I have Jackbox Party Pack 7. The high points of Party Pack 7 are high indeed. Playing Talking Points with Reagan's side of the family made me laugh maybe harder than I ever had before. And Blather Round is also a consistent crowd pleaser that I've never failed to have a good time with. And then, of course, if you don't already have a version of Quiplash, you can't go wrong there with Quiplash 3. There's a pretty hard drop off after that. Champed Up is far from the best drawing game, and then the task based Devil in the Details really only works with a specific type of group that's interested in more than just, simple party games for laughs. Number 32, I have Jackbox Party Pack 6. I have a soft spot for Party Pack 6 as this was the first pack that I tried. All in, it wasn't a terrible pack to start with, thanks mostly to the endlessly entertaining Trivia Murder Party 2, which they've actually gone through and updated. It was the first Jackbox game that they did a free update on, so that was really cool. They added some new questions. Without question, I think the best trivia game that the Jackbox team has ever crafted, and definitely still a go-to for us at our parties. But outside of that, I would say Push the Button is probably the runner-up. It's a complicated deception game that it doesn't work well with the casual crowd, but if you get the right group for it, it's really fun. Then you have Role Models and Dictionarium, both of which are simple and fun, and hard to go wrong with them. But I will say you got to avoid Joke Boat at all costs. That thing is a dead and half. Number 31, I have Wingspan. Despite being a relatively simple strategic luck-based card game, the digital version of Wingspan may be the most addictive video game I've ever played. Once you're locked in, it is almost impossible to free yourself from that one more game mentality, for me anyway. Which means I have to be careful about when I really sit down and play some Wingspan, because typically when I do, that is all I'm doing for the rest of the night. At 30, I have Yu-Gi-Oh! Worldwide Edition Stairway to the Destined Duel. There's not much to Stairway to the Destined Duel outside of a straight-laced Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck builder with classic cards and rules. If you're like me and grew up with those cards and rules, you won't find a better pick up and play handheld experience. Others will probably be bored by the repetitive grind necessary to build out a deck to truly competitive levels, but if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan, it's a very good time. Number 29, I have Jackbox Party Pack 8. This is the best of the Jackbox Party Packs I have experienced. Party Pack 8 has no misses and two of the best games the series has ever seen in Job Job and Pole Mine, the latter of which I have still never managed to win across at least a dozen attempts. So that's going to be a big moment when I finally pull it off. On top of those, Drawful Animate is the best version of what is a true Jackbox classic. Then you have the Wheel of Enormous Proportions, which is an enjoyable, if somewhat forgettable, kind of luck-based trivia contest. And then Weapons Drawn, which is among the most complicated but entertaining games I've seen from Jackbox. So if you have want to pick one pack to start with or just to get, I would recommend Party Pack 8. It's really great. Number 28, I have The Artful Escape. I may sound kind of hard on The Artful Escape elsewhere in this podcast, but it is a cool experience that you really have no excuse not to try out given its brevity and it doesn't require any skill at all. Guitar aficionados will get the most out of it, but anyone that can relate to just, a classic story of a character deciding to chase his own dreams instead of, sticking with the reality that's been kind of dictated to him, will get something out of it. Number 27, I have Tetris Effect Connected. At the end of the day, Tetris is Tetris. It's a block droppy puzzle game that anyone can enjoy. It's not this world-beating masterpiece that some bafflingly try to insist that it is today, when games can offer so much more than that. But Tetris Effect is definitely the best version of Tetris that money can buy, and it actually is an oddly touching experience when you kind of sink into the flow state and let the music and the visuals sort of seep into your psyche there. So, yeah, really great experience, Tetris Effect. Number 26, I have Pokemon White 2. Pokemon Black and White 2 get a lot of mileage out of being Pokemon games, which obviously boast a formula so intrinsically great they're hard to screw up. But at the same time, they do deliver a a pretty massive amount of recycled content from the original Gen 5 games, which, frankly, not one of the best regions of the series to start with. They're not the worst games of the series, but they are in the running. Number 25, I have Halo 4. This is the definition of a mixed bag. On the one hand, Halo 4 delivers what is my favorite iteration of Master Chief and Cortana. Both of them helm an emotional tale of sacrifice, grief, and loss. On the other hand, it is damn near the series' low point in terms of level design and especially enemy variety. Those Prometheans just aren't fun to fight, and that is a damning issue in an FPS that hinges its success on what is, essentially repetitive action. Um, Still has its high points. Halo 4 was largely a massive step down from the Bungie-led titles, despite its graphical and character-driven successes. At number 24, I have The Wolf Among Us. Well, The Wolf Among Us lacks the storytelling mastery, gut punches, and twists that the best in the adventure-like genre, like Heavy Rain, deliver. It's still a strong atmospheric experience that all fans of the genre should check out, especially those interested in like a boys-esque twisting of classic fairy tales. It also released in 2014, which was a notoriously awful year for games, so it seemed really great by comparison to most of what released back then. And hey, maybe someday we'll even get the Vaporware sequel we've been promised for years now. So number 23, I have Spyro the Dragon. While I don't have the fondness for the first Spyro that I do for Year of the Dragon, which sadly I haven't gotten around to finishing yet this year, I do think that there are some things it does better than even Year of the Dragon. In particular, just like the grand approach to level design, they really have grand scope in that first game, and I don't think that was ever improved in the sequels. And some of it's pretty deviously designed supercharged challenges and the secrets that go along with that are also very impressive. For a first attempt at a series, while 3D platforming was still in its infancy, Spyro the Dragon delivers, and it's still a great time today. Then number 22, I have Psychonauts. Nobody's going to mistake Psychonauts for the most polished platformer ever made, but it's certainly a contender for the most creative. Some of the level designs here are among the greatest ever, and even when the mechanics falter, some of them, like the levitation ball, never fail to be satisfying to utilize. The game also has a lot of heart. It's got powerful theming, it's got memorable characters, and one of the most satisfying completion experiences in gaming. At 21, I have Observation. I expected Observation to be good, but not necessarily for it to stick with me like it has. The storytelling is certainly esoteric, yet gripping at the same time, and its approach to atmospheric horror that doesn't rely on cheap jump scares is exactly what I'd like to see more of in that space. There are certainly some moments in this game that will stick with me for a lifetime, and probably you too, if you can look past the game's occasional jankiness and horrible save checkpointing. At number 20, I have Astro's Playroom. It's not the Astro game I was supposed to finish this year, so working on that one. But Astro's Playroom is nonetheless as fun today as it was when I got my PS5 at launch 4 years ago. It's one of the greatest launch titles, and I would argue one of the most simply pure fun video games ever made, especially for longtime PlayStation fans like me. At number 19, I have Halo 3 ODST. Although ODST boasts the same great mission and level design of the best entries in the series, it is held back by a truly horrible cast of characters, and particularly, perhaps the worst love story I have ever seen. When your writing is getting outpaced by children's Barbies movies that my wife grew up watching, you know something has gone wrong. Combining and assessing those two extremes is hard to do, but at the end of the day, I always have a great time when I play ODST, so that has to win out over anything else. After all, you can skip those cutscenes. Some of those ODST levels are unmissable for FPS fans. Number 18, I have Spiritfarer, an underrated gem from the best year in gaming history, 2020. Spiritfarer is one that's easy to overlook, but just as easy to fall in love with if you give it a chance. Its mixture of exploration with cozy building elements is a winning formula, especially with a loved one at your side helping you cut through the chores and maximize the fun. The writing falls short of the emotional gut punches that I think the writers were going for, but when you wrap it all up in the rest of this package, the shortcomings of the writing is kind of more of a blip on the radar than like a garish blemish. Number 17, I have Star Wars Battlefront 2. For the 2017 Star Wars Battlefront 2. As we've seen, Star Wars Battlefront 2 made up a surprisingly large chunk of my gaming experience in 2024. And as a massive fan of the original games back in the mid 2000s, I never would have expected this modern version to surpass them, especially after its disastrous launch in 2017. But with all that bullshit stripped out of it, what's left in is an explosive, content-rich, addictive multiplayer experience that pays beautiful tribute to its IP and features a surprisingly enjoyable single-player campaign to boot. In terms of games that exceeded my expectations this year, maybe none did so better than Star Wars Battlefront 2. Number 16, I have Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Put simply, this is kart racing, maybe even video game racing in general at its peak. The staggering amount of content here, which is doubled with the expansion pack, is unbelievable, especially when you consider how good it all is. The original tracks are my favorite, but as a longtime player of the series, I also love having essentially a Mario Kart greatest hits ready to go whenever, wherever on the Switch. You throw in online multiplayer, and you have what is truly a modern racing masterpiece. At number 15, I have Jak and Daxter. Few games that blew my mind as much as Jak and Daxter did when my friend Cade brought it over to my house when I got my new PS2. While I had cut my teeth on games like Spyro and Crash, they all paled in comparison to just the massive, atmospheric, and completely interconnected world of the original Jak. And I couldn't believe how impressive it was, making it to like a high peak and being able to look out over the world and see where I'd been and, critically where I was going next. To this day, Jak and Daxter stands tall as one of the top 5 platformers ever made. It is phenomenal. Number 14, I have Halo. I talked about Halo at length last week when I ranked it as one of the greatest and most important launch titles of all time, and while that is certainly the case, it also stands among the most influential and I would argue greatest FPS games of all time. Every FPS that has come out on console since Halo in 2001 owes it a great debt, and it was single-handedly responsible for the glut of attempts of Halo killers that we got throughout the 2000s. Other than its own sequels, none of them came close. So number 13, I have Halo 2. As good as the first Halo is, Halo 2 improved upon it in just about every way, with dramatically improved storytelling, deeper gameplay, a significantly expanded scope, and of course, more diverse weaponry at the disposal of Master Chief and the Arbiter. It's interesting to see that this was Reagan's favorite of the Halo batch, and while I don't fully agree, there's no question Halo 2 is a truly titanic FPS, and like others in this series, essential reading for any FPS fan. And then at number 12, I have Halo 3. Halo 3 may not have the layered storytelling of its predecessor, but it makes up for that with its amazing FPS campaign levels, ridiculous sense of scale, and payoffs upon payoffs in that campaign. Really great stuff. Number 11, I have Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. As I noted earlier, playing through this hilarious game with my wife was, being able to put our heads together to crack the increasingly ridiculous yet ingenious cases was one of my favorite gaming experiences ever. Phoenix Wright is packed to the brim with humor, twists, betrayals, colorful characters, and not to mention some of the genuinely best courtroom drama I've ever seen. And thanks to its approachability, it's one of those games that I think everyone should at least give a shot. You might really like it like I did. Number 10 now, top 10 of the year, Halo Reach. I'm a Master Chief Defender until the day I die, but I had to admit the best Halo game is one of the few that doesn't feature him at all. I am a sucker for this doomed squadron making their last stand storytelling trope. And other than maybe Rogue One, which I do think blatantly copied Halo Reach specifically in some ways, I've never seen it done better. This is Bungie and the Halo series at its peak, from the gameplay to the level design to the storytelling to the music and the atmosphere. It is the best FPS campaign I've ever played, and one that you must experience if you enjoy the genre at all. Up at number 9, I have Fire Emblem. Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time, so I'm no stranger to enjoying older titles, particularly JRPGs. But I would be lying if I thought I would put the original Fire Emblem anywhere near this high on my list when I started it at the start of this year. The storytelling and cast of Fire Emblem is great. Where it really shines is the emergent stories of triumph and loss that are exclusive to your own playthrough. I will never forget watching this Pegasus Knight that I had built up essentially from scratch get surrounded by an imposing enemy force, and I had just completely written her off. I didn't think there was any escape for her, and then only for her to make it through unscathed at 1 HP. She dodged a couple of critical attacks and lived to fight another day. Each playthrough of Fire Emblem is full of moments like that, and I just can't wait to play more games in this series and in this genre, which I expect to carry that tradition forward. But number 8, I have Pokemon Red. Rounding out my number 8 on this list is the game that currently sits at number 25 on my top 25 all-time list. This was a fun experience for me this year. It gave me the excuse to play the original version of Red while my wife played Fire Red. It had been some time since I played the original, and while I definitely still prefer Fire Red, either version will give you Pokemon in its rawest, most pure form. It's not the best game in the series, but for a game as old as this to come as close as it does to that is a testament to its greatness all these years later. At number 7, I have Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. As I've discussed previously, my first playthrough of this game with my cousin Brett at my side was the best gaming experience I've ever had, one that I will cherish for a lifetime. My most recent run with Reagan was not quite as good, but watching her cast aside the Jedi Order to watch the world burn is definitely not something I'll be forgetting anytime soon. No matter how or when you play this game, I guarantee it will create some memories for you to cherish as well, especially if you're a lifelong Star Wars fan like I am. For the Star Wars license, it really doesn't get much better than Knights of the Old Republic. At number 6, I have Chained Echoes. The fact that Chained Echoes, which is a sprawling epic of a JRPG that stands among the very best in the genre, is this high up while still being made by essentially one person, that tells you all you need to know about the skill of that individual and the amount of heart that went into this piece of video game art. Beyond the world-spanning story and phenomenal cast of characters is arguably the best turn-based combat system I've ever experienced in a game, and let me tell you, I've experienced a lot of them. As noted earlier, Chain Echoes is also one of the very best completionist experiences ever. So long as you have a trusty guide as your side, but if you're playing a JRPG without a guide, what are you, a sadist? At number 5, I have The Last of Us. There was a time that I considered The Last of Us the best game I'd ever played, and while it doesn't quite have the same hold on me today as it did when I first played it in 2018, it's still a truly masterful experience that everyone should experience along with its sequel, which you'll find is even higher up this list. Even though it's as linear as games come, I have found myself going back to The Last of Us most years since I first finished it in 2018. I think a lot of that has to do with making sure others like my grandfather or grandmother, my cousin, my wife, had the chance to experience what is one of the finest stories ever told. But I'd be lying if I said that all those repeat playthroughs weren't also for me. I mean, like this year, I was playing it with just myself and had a great time. Number 4, I have Octopath Traveler 2, my top new experience of 2024 outside of the very best of the Final Fantasy series and Kingdom Hearts 1. Octopath Traveler 2 is the best JRPG I've ever played. That means it's the best JRPG of the 21st century. That means if you haven't played it, you are messing up. Fix that. At number 3, I have To the Moon. As I've noted when previously discussing To the Moon, I have to stay vague to avoid spoilers, so I'm guessing the vast majority of those listening to this have not played it for themselves. Suffice to say, it is one of the greatest stories ever told in a video game. It is one of the most beautiful expressions of art in a video game. It takes absolutely no skill to complete, and it lasts only 3 to 4 hours. Simply put, everyone must play it. There is no excuse not to, and there's a good chance your life will never quite be the same afterward. Mine was not. At number 2, I have The Last of Us Part 2. While Part 2 is something of an odd entry for me to count in 2024, considering I haven't played most of it this year, I just really wrapped up a previous playthrough that began in 2023. It's still a truly phenomenal game that basically every gamer should experience, mixing satisfying yet brutal gameplay and perhaps the most ambitious and demanding story ever told in a video game. Is demanding of the utmost respect, which is all you'll find for it on this podcast. And then number 1 was Bloodborne, the best game I played this year. I didn't finish it for the first time this year. I love my playthrough of it so much it actually moved up on my top 25 of all time list from number 5 to number 2. And obviously, I loved it so much I made an entire hour plus episode of this podcast dedicated to it 2 weeks ago. Go check that out if you want to deep dive into why I think this game is so special. But it goes without saying, Bloodborne was without question the best game I finished in 2024. So there's my ranking of the games I played in 2024. Let me run through it again really fast and just rank because I made little notes of the ones that I had never played before, which is 30 of them. So I'm going to give you just a quick rundown of like the new games that kind of what the list looks like with just the new ones. So that is Scramble at 30, Facade at 29, Yai Kung Fu at 28, Time Pilot at 27, Pinball Dreams at 26, Jackbox Party Pack 5 at 25, Super Mario Kart at 24, Parappa the Rapper 2 at 23, Jackbox Party Pack 4 at 22, R4 Ridge Racer Type 4 at 21, Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario Advance 4, whatever, at number 20, Mario Party 2 at 19, Luminous Remastered at 18, Mario Party Superstars at 17, Mario Party 3 at 16, Jackbox Party Pack 2 at 15, Drawful 2 at 14, Jackbox Party Pack 7 at 13, Jackbox Party Pack 6 at 12, Wingspan at 11, Jackbox Party Pack 8 at 10, The Artful Escape at 9, Pokemon White 2 at 8, and then we have a big gap, Observation at 7, Star Wars Battlefront 2 at 6, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe at 5, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney at 4, Fire Emblem at 3, Chained Echoes at 2, and Octopath Traveler 2 at 1. So that's my ranking of the games that I had not played before this year. So there you go. Best games I've played in 2024, best new games I've played in 2024, all kind of my stats of the games I played and the games I started and my stats on PlayStation, Xbox. You got a pretty good look at what my year in gaming looked like in 2024. So when you list it out all like that, it actually does feel like a fairly substantial lineup, even if it is lacking even one of the big heavy hitters of 2024. That said, I think there is something to be said for going back and checking out the games of yesteryear you might have missed. After all, just because a game isn't new doesn't mean it can't be new to you. And even replays have their place for the well-read player. And I think that people should go back and check out all the not all the games, but a lot of the great games from history that you might have missed. Look forward to either next week or the week after. I haven't fully decided which yet, and I'm going to break down my favorite albums and songs of the year, which actually did come out in 2024, as well as a look at some of the films I checked out this year and the very few books that I read as well. Until then, you can just remember you can write into the podcast at controlledburnes@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show and you want to hear more lists, please subscribe, follow, like, review, wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll see you next time.